Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me. I have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to be kind of in and out of the PowerPoint, but we'll just kind of start with that. So today we are going to go through a little presentation that I have. It's MS Awareness Month. I have multiple sclerosis, if you did not know that. So in addition to working with people and training people in the exercise world with neurological conditions, I am also a client with a neurological condition. So today we're going to be talking about fatigue, specifically in MS, but some of this does actually apply to other neurological conditions and just other issues that people might have that when it's applicable to everyone, I'll try to make note of that so that we can, if we're teachers, we can know that it's like, well, this would be true of any person. And then there's stuff that this is true of people with neurological conditions, and then MS sort of has its own specific stuff going on. So we're going to talk about fatigue. We're going to talk about what it is, and then what to do, and kind of importantly, what not to do. So our goals for today are to talk about what causes fatigue in multiple sclerosis, and then figure out what we can do to manage it if we personally are living with that. And then also, if we are working with a client who has MS and we're working in an exercise environment, what is the right dosage of exercise to give somebody to where you're not going to make their fatigue worse? Ideally, exercise is something that energizes people. So we're going to talk about what makes neurological fatigue different from just regular normal person fatigue. We're going to talk about something I like to call energy banking. And that's something you can do as a person with MS or as a teacher working with someone with MS. And then we'll talk about some exercise strategies. We're not going to so much talk about specific exercises, but just exercise strategies. So if you are new to us, this is who we are. So I am half of the Neuro Studio. So my name is Mariska, in case that wasn't on some sort of printed materials that you saw. I have been teaching Pilates for about 20 years, and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2002. So I consider myself a veteran in the patient department. My business partner is Megan Capel Duffy. So she's the person who's not me. And we run an organization called the Neuro Studio together. So the Neuro Studio is mainly video-based and in-person based training for people with neurological conditions and the teachers and physical therapists and trainers that work with them. And so it's sort of our mission to make sure that we are preventing as much disability as is possible with diseases like multiple sclerosis, with injuries like stroke or brain injury, with things like Parkinson's disease. So next month, if Parkinson's disease is of interest, I'll be doing a presentation on that. So something to sort of look for if that interests you. So first, let's talk about regular fatigue. I liked this picture because you have the kids jumping up and down, and I feel like you see kids and you're just like, can I just bottle that and put it in my own body and soul to have that kind of energy? But being around children can also be something that is very tiring. So when people have fatigue and they're just kind of your normal everyday person who does not have a neurological disease, the way that they would describe fatigue is that their energy is low, they feel kind of unmotivated. And this is something that anyone can deal with. Like, as somebody with a neurological disease, I can have this kind of fatigue. I can have regular fatigue. Like, it was a long day, people were irritating me, any of those things. And then also I'm 48 years old. So you also have, it's like getting a little older. Things are just more tiring than they used to be. I can't go out and drink really ever, and certainly can't do it the way I would do it if I was in college. Like, those things, you look back on and it's like, how could you get up the next day? But it's like, you could because you were 21. That's why you could do that. But regular fatigue is something that it increases as you get older. You could get more tired if you were sick. I'm getting over a cold, so I'm still coughing a little bit. So I'm still not like at my full normal energy for me because I have this cold that's just been lingering. If you have a bad night's sleep, if you have a stressful situation, if you hate your boss, if you hate your husband, if you hate your children, if you have money issues, like anything that's stressful can make you feel tired, right? Because our body kind of shuts down. And we're just like, I don't want to, deal with that. But in the MS world, MS tired it's a special kind of tired. It's a very kind of different thing. So MS fatigue is something that is actually the most common symptom that people with MS have. Almost everyone has it. So we're talking like 80 to 90% of patients. And it generally gets worse as the day goes on. And then an interesting thing about multiple sclerosis is that people tend to be very heat sensitive. So if it's hot or humid, or even worse, hot and humid, it's like your energy, I would say it's like kryptonite. It's just like your energy just feels like it's being like sucked out of you. So if you're a teacher working with a person with MS and the room is sort of warm, that is something that you can sort of look at, because if your body temperature is raised even by 1/4 of 1 degree, that can actually impact where there's MS damage, and make that MS damage sort of act up. So for me, what I experience is if it's like really hot, I get very sluggish feeling and kind of like a little bit dizzy. So the sluggish feeling is the fatigue, and the dizziness is actually another MS symptom that's really common, which is a vestibular balance issue. So like those are things that you kind of need to watch out for if you are working with somebody who has MS. MS fatigue is going to come on like sort of quickly. Regular fatigue is sort of like as the day goes on, you're sort of plodding along and it's like maybe you're getting a little more tired. I would say the thing that I find hardest about MS, like if you ask me from living with it for 20 some years, is that it's very unpredictable how you're going to feel from one moment to the next moment. So I could think that I have a lot of energy and I'm going to go for a walk, and I could walk like a certain distance and not like necessarily plan that I also have to walk that distance back, because I'm like, maybe my energy is really good, but then it can all of a sudden just like fall apart. And then I'm just like dragging to make my way back to where I was, or I'm calling an Uber or something like that. Now, MS fatigue has technically 2 causes, but I consider that has 4 causes. So first is primary. So just the fact of having MS can cause fatigue. So if you are unfamiliar, just a really quick little overview. Multiple sclerosis causes a loss of a protein called myelin, which is basically the insulation that coats the axon part of a nerve cell. And the axon is where information is going to travel from one nerve cell to the next nerve cell. And the way we move and the way we take in information from our environment, it's like one nerve cell has to transmit information to the next nerve cell, to the next nerve cell, to the next nerve cell. And in MS, what happens is when there's damage to the myelin, it's like that signal is a little bit, can be delayed. It can be sort of stuttered. So it's like not happening really smoothly. It could be completely halted depending on where the damage is. So when you have damage in usually this would be brain, not spinal cord, because in MS, the damage is brain and spinal cord usually. In areas of your brain, when you have not enough insulation for those nerve signals to be firing really well, what ends up happening is it's just like you get tired more easily. And depending on where those signals are damaged can impact what kind of tired you are. So you can have, if it's in the motor cortex of your brain, so the part that controls movement, you can start to feel that sort of heaviness in terms of how you're moving. If it's in the part of your brain that controls language, you can start to feel like you can't find words, you can't, speak well, things like that can happen. Secondary fatigue is actually, I would bet, more common than primary fatigue. And so secondary fatigue would be like if you have insomnia, which I have horrible insomnia, you're fatigued because you didn't get a good night's sleep. If you have pain, which causes you to have difficulty sleeping or difficulty being comfortable, and you're having to like move around all the time and you just kind of can't find a restful position, that can also cause fatigue. Insomnia and multiple sclerosis is usually, it's very common, and it usually does require medication to work with. I tried all of the natural things for years, and ultimately ended up going on prescription medication, which I've actually been on now for like 15 years, 16 years, 17 years, like a long, long time. And then I also take medication for nerve pain, because if your foot feels like it's on fire, very hard to sleep with that. And then muscle spasticity. So if you have muscle spasms, they can wake you up. For non-MS people, if you get like a foot cramp or something while you're sleeping, obviously you're not sleeping through that. So basically those symptoms can prevent you from getting sleep or even just kind of being able to chill. So that can cause fatigue. Now, sort of a subsection of each of those is muscular fatigue, which is where I think about, like if I was walking, like I can walk without any, I don't need a cane, I don't need like really anything. But I use a foot drop brace because my ankle doesn't want to bend enough for me to walk without feeling like I'm going to trip. So I would get more tired walking because it's more effortful for me to walk than it would be for somebody who doesn't have an ankle that doesn't want to move or a leg that gets really tight. When you have that area of your brain that controls movement impacted by multiple sclerosis, you basically can go from like everything is like okay and not too bad to a very steep and abrupt drop off of function, right? So it's like if I was outside walking, I could be doing really well. I could be going along for like, I'm in a mile or something and I'm walking with the dog. And then all of a sudden it's just like the energy reserves that I've had in my brain, spinal cord, nerve signals it's gone. Like, and then for me, then my leg doesn't want to bend. And then it's just like, I really have to stop. I just can't keep going. In terms of like exercises, I don't really push myself to where I would like get to the point where I would have to stop. I would just, do however many reps I was going to do. But that's like something that can happen. It's just like the body is just done. And what's interesting about that is usually if you just take like a 5-minute break, you can find some energy reserves again, but you might need to have sort of a big kind of reset. So it might be like you need to just kind of chill for a couple of hours. And then cognitive issues can be something that comes up when people are really fatigued. So what's happening a lot of times in people who have MS, once you've lost a lot of that myelin, you actually have atrophy of the brain. So the brain is shrinking. And also the spinal cord can atrophy, in which case the signals are just not traveling very quickly. And so in MS, what happens is people have some cognitive issues. A very common one is aphasia, which is sort of word searching. So people are trying to think of like the word that they want to say and they can't figure out what that word is, or they're just not being as eloquent in how they're speaking. And that can be a sign of fatigue. One of my best friends has a lot of cognitive speech issues from MS. She actually has very few physical issues, like in terms of walking or whatever, which is totally fine. But our relationship is almost exclusively on text message and not on phone calls, because she has a much easier time writing out what she wants to say than having her brain connect to her tongue and her lips and whatever to make the words come out as quickly and easily as she can do typing. So that's also something you can sort of, look to. I actually didn't realize how bad my MS fatigue had gotten until several years ago. It was, I think I wrote this in one of the emails. It was the next to last season, so I guess season 9 of Game of Thrones. And I was just always tired, and I was just like, felt like I always needed to take a nap. So I had laid down around like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then my husband woke me up and said, the finale of the season of Game of Thrones was going to be starting. And I was like, well, Game of Thrones is on at 9 o'clock at night. So that was like a 6-hour nap. If you're taking 6-hour naps, that is not a normal thing. So I was at that point not on any disease modifying drug for MS. I was just like, kind of thought everything was just kind of calm and whatever. But taking 6-hour naps is not a very good way to get through having a job. So that's when I actually went back on having some MS medications. Okay, so we do get warning signs that the fatigue is coming on. And so if you are a person with MS, like this is a good time to take a break. And if you're working with a person with MS, this is a good time to do something really easy. Something that's not a particularly challenging thing mentally or physically. So if your eyes start to get tired, the sort of heaviness like we all have when we're getting a little bit sleepy. If your legs start to get tired. So for me, the best way I can describe it, because it's only for me one leg, is it feels like my one leg has like a 10-pound weight on it. So it's harder to lift it. It's like sluggish to move it. It doesn't bend as much as the other side. It doesn't flex at the hip as much as the other side. And this single-sided imbalance in weakness is very common in MS. It's also common in stroke. So it's basically if you have damage on one side of the brain, it's the other side of the body that's going to be experiencing that. When people start to get a lot of stiffness in like their shoulders and their back, just that feeling of sleepiness, when it becomes hard to concentrate, which for me happens seemingly on all conference calls. Like if a conference call goes longer than 30 minutes, I don't know if it's an MS thing or just I don't like a conference call, but I tend to find it hard to concentrate at the longer something goes. If you're irritable or impatient, that can be a sign of neurological fatigue. It could also just be a sign that somebody around you is being irritating and you're feeling impatient. So it's not that it's always going to be MS. It's like it could also be something else. General feelings of being bored and unmotivated and like just sort of like, like not really interested in doing anything, that can be a fatigue sign. And then having like the sensation of sort of that run down feeling like you get when you have the flu. So it's not the muscle aches or the fever or anything part of the flu. It's just that like you just feel like somebody, beat you with a stick or ran over you with a truck kind of sensation. That is something that you would see pretty commonly in MS fatigue. So we know that fatigue is a problem. And if we're looking at 80 to 90% of people that have MS could end up having that level of fatigue that is really problematic, then we need to figure out how we're going to get through life, knowing that this fatigue could be an issue. So there is this one concept that people like to use a lot called the spoon theory. The reason I don't like the spoon theory is because I'm but there's so many other better ways to describe it. So the spoon theory was a person with lupus came up with, and she said that she has 10 spoons and that each activity costs a certain amount of spoons, but she only has 10 spoons in the day. So I prefer to look at it as like you have a wallet with money and you have a certain amount of money to spend during the day, because that seems like a much more logical analogy to me. Or you have a tank of gas and you start the day on full, and anything you do is going to take money out of the bank or take gas out of the car, right? So look, if we're looking at the bank analogy, I'm going to start the day with, say, $100. This person has more than $100. Lucky them. So let's say I start with $100. Every single activity that I'm going to do in a day has a cost to it. Some things don't cost very much, and then some things cost a lot. So for me, something that costs a lot is a social gathering, right? So something where I have to see and interact with a lot of people has a very, very high cost. So if I am teaching a workshop in person, and so my in-person workshops, I might be there for like 8 hours. I do not go out afterwards. I go like, I'm always, invited out if I'm teaching in like another country or something. They're like, come to dinner with us. I'm like, literally, I cannot, because the bank is empty. Like there is no energy left. And I just go back to my hotel room and plop down and watch Netflix and order room service, because there's literally nothing left. Like that one endeavor has taken out the whole bank. Luckily, that's not what my normal life is. And I've been able to really schedule my life in a way that is all about protecting the bank. So I don't ever do anything before 10 a.m. I don't schedule calls before 10 a.m. I don't schedule doctor's appointments before 10 a.m. unless it's absolutely necessary and there's no way around doing it. I tend to have better energy sort of later in the day, which is actually a little atypical for MS. Like most people's energy sort of is when they wake up, it's a little bit better. I sort of don't really have energy when I wake up. So I don't work out first thing. I don't go on walks first thing. Like I just sort of start my day very, very easily so that the bank is still full. If I wanted to, if I had a lot of conference calls, each one of those is taking $20 out of the bank. If I do a workout, for me, that takes out it might take out $20. A walk is actually going to take out a little bit more than a workout that's not a walk. Taking a shower where I have to wash my hair and then dry my hair actually takes out like $40 or $50 out of the bank, because that is something that gets you kind of overheated, and heat makes fatigue worse. And I have a lot of hair. So if I'm washing and drying my hair, that is like a major withdrawal on the bank. So I only wash my hair like every 3 or 4 days because it just takes too much out of the bank. If we have money left over because we had a day where it was just like just the right amount of everything, so maybe we were left with $20 from that day, you actually might have a little more energy the next day. But if you are in a deficit because you overspent or you were teaching a workshop and talking for 8 hours, then you might have a day where you need to do nothing, right? So if I was teaching a workshop, they're generally weekend workshops, I schedule the following day or two where I have almost nothing that I have on a must-do list, because I need to replenish the bank, right? I'm like, the bank, I'm in debt. I need to like figure out ways to put money back in. And this sort of goes to managing the bank is managing our choices. I think the best thing I ever learned in the business world was to delegate stuff. I always say my husband and I are very different people. If you ask my husband, hey, Brian, can you do me a favor? He immediately says yes. And if you say, hey, Mariska, can you do me a favor? I immediately say, what is it? I never say yes when somebody's just throwing out a hypothetical favor, because I'm like, I don't know that I want to do that. Like, I might want to say this other person could do it, or I might, it might just not be something that is going to, if it's going to take too much out of the bank, I'm not going to do it. And also I just don't do stuff I don't like, because I'm too old and cranky to do things that I hate doing. Choosing rest is actually really important in terms of workouts and exercise. rest days are something a lot of people don't take, and rest days are necessary for normal people with non-neurological bodies, non-neurologically impaired bodies, to have muscle recovery. It's even more important for people who have neurological conditions. I do believe you should move every day, but I don't believe you should do tough workouts every day. We make our choices in how much we exercise. And then what I'm going to talk about sort of in depth is how we're exercising, like making a choice to exercise in a way that does not worsen fatigue. Moving throughout the day is actually a good way to boost your energy. And by that, I mean, get off the couch, right? So it's like, it's very easy to sit on the couch and get locked on the couch and never want to get up off the couch. I am the queen of binge watching TV shows. And I'm like, Netflix no longer asks me, are you still watching? Because yes, maybe I am still watching 5 episodes in a row, but getting up, walking to the kitchen, getting up, standing, getting on the floor, and just like not just watching from the couch, but actually being on the floor and kind of rolling around or doing something, getting a foam roller out, like all of those things can actually help your energy go up. Whereas just sitting on the couch is obviously not going to help your energy go up. Routines and automations. I think this is like a really interesting one. I eat the same breakfast, 1 or 2 breakfasts every single morning, and have for years, because that way I don't have to think about it. I don't cook dinners. My husband does the cooking because you don't want me doing the cooking. It's not going to be nearly as good as when my husband does the cooking, but I don't care what we have for dinner ever. So these are not things I have to think about. A lot of very successful people in business kind of know this as a thing as well, that the less choices you have to make, the better your energy can be. I don't really have to make a lot of clothing choices because I can live in like yoga clothes. So I just basically am like, this is clean and it's at the top of the pile of the laundry that I just did. So it's like, that's what I would choose to wear. But like Barack Obama never picked out his own clothes because that was one thing he didn't have to do as like a choice. If you look at like Steve Jobs, he had the black turtleneck and the blue jeans. It was sort of like a uniform that he wore. I have a coworker from when I used to be a creative director, and he only wore black. He would sometimes wear gray, like in the summer, which he called summer black. But if you only have black clothes, everything matches. I do this when I travel. I have outfits that like go together. It's like capsule outfits. So it's like black pants, black shoes, different color tops and sweaters. So it's like, you don't have to do that much thinking. And anything you can make a routine, like the same breakfast, like whatever, anything you can automate is going to make you have less of that bank of energy spent. Prioritize. If I made a to-do list right now of all the things that I need to do for the 2 businesses, or actually 3 businesses that I have, that would make me want to cry, right? So it's like, if I looked at it and I'd be like, okay, I need to write a blog post for Fuse Ladder. I need to do this one branding exercise for Fuse Ladder. I need to do an Instagram post. I need to shoot some stuff, videos for the Neuro Studio. I need to like have this meeting and like whatever. It's like that all can make you like, first of all, anxious, and that can make your fatigue worse. So I don't do to-do lists. I do must-do lists. So I have today, I must have this webinar, right? So this was on my must-do list for today. So I have 3 things on my list today. I had to go to PT because I have a completely unrelated to MS rotator cuff tear. So I went to PT. I worked out with my trainer, which I do every Tuesday and Thursday. And then I have this. So for the whole rest of the day, I'm going to go based on what energy remains and then pick something off the need to get around to this week part of like a to-do list, right? So I don't look at the stuff that needs to be done like down the line. Like I'll put in my calendar that like this weekend, I need to get my tax stuff together to get to the accountant to do taxes, but I don't need to do it till this weekend. So I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to worry about it at this point. If I have a lot of energy, maybe I would get to it, but only if I have like a lot of energy. There's also an impact about our lifestyle choices, right? How we eat, like different things that we do. So sugar bombs are not good for anybody's energy. So I am not one of those people who has MS and is like, I never have gluten, I never have sugar. I have sugar every single day. But I never have sugar by itself without something that is going to change how your body physiologically is going to respond to that sugar. So that would be like a food combining thing. So I actually hate donuts. I put donuts on here, but I am one of those people. I'm weird. I don't like fried baked things, fried doughy things like of any. I don't like funnel cakes. I don't like anything in that family. I love ice cream. I love pie. I love cakes. I love all that kind of stuff. So it was my birthday this past weekend. I had cake, but I had it after I had, like some sort of protein. And then it was a very large piece of cake. I didn't have the whole thing, right? So it's like, you need to make sure your energy doesn't like go up and down. There are actually some kind of cool, like tools / apps for that now. There's one called, I think it's called Level. And it's a glucose monitor. And you can like just, somehow it sticks in your skin and it measures like glucose. And so you can actually find out if like the things you eat are like making your blood sugar like spike and drop, because you don't want it to be spiking and dropping. You want it to be kind of, pretty even. And some foods that we think are really healthy, like oatmeal, can actually cause huge glucose spikes. So I cannot have a breakfast that is a carb breakfast, because I will be starving like immediately afterwards. I have to have a protein-based breakfast. So this is all going to be very individual to someone's personal anatomy. But these are just things to consider. A lot of times we feel tired and hungry when we're actually dehydrated. So I always say, especially if people are trying to watch their weight, if you feel hungry, have a glass of water first, and then see if you still feel hungry. I'm sure you've experienced this where you get dehydrated and you get a headache and you feel really tired. It's like a lot of times dehydration is a cause of why we feel tired or why we feel unwell. I actually do not do caffeine. People always ask, like, how is it possible that you don't do caffeine? And it's like, well, I just never really have. So it's not something I notice that I miss because I never have done it. But for some people, caffeine can be a good energy boost, but you also have to be careful about when you're having it. So if you have caffeine too late and it's impacting your sleep, then you're getting a bank with not $100 in it the next day, right? You're starting your day with maybe you have $60 in the bank because you didn't get a good night's sleep because you had caffeine too late. Some people, my husband is weird like this, like caffeine makes him sleepy. I don't know why. It's just who he is. And then there are multiple different prescription medications. If you have MS that you can get prescribed. I actually have a prescription for one. It's called amantadine. It's one of the more commonly prescribed ones, and I take it more situationally. So it's more like if I'm feeling very, very, very fatigued on a certain day and I can't afford to feel as fatigued, then I'll take it. There's also other drugs like Provigil, and then like the drugs that they tend to give kids with like hyperactivity that do the reverse for adults and make them have more energy. Like those are common drugs that you would have. And then if you have cognitive issues, there are actually two supplements that have a lot of research behind them. One is called Bacopa. It's Bacopa, and it's an Ayurvedic, so it's an Indian herbal medication that there's actually studies behind it that show that you have improved cognitive function, because I actually think what that one does is it increases blood flow. in the brain. So better blood flow, better nerve conduction. And then there's another one called lion's mane, which is one of the mushrooms, and you can buy mushroom blends and whatever. And so some of the mushrooms can actually help with cognitive stuff. And these are like backed by clinical trials. So there are supplements that can be helpful. There's medication that can be helpful. I am all about the, if you have to have like a significant medical issue, then medication is not a bad thing, but lifestyle also needs to be a part of it for you to have like sort of the best result. Some people are fine doing lifestyle only, and I did that for a while, and I can't do it anymore. So it's also like, where you are in your own personal journey. So let's talk about exercise, moving my little head over here. Let's talk about exercise that is not great for people with MS, and sort of some of the mistakes that we end up making. So the biggest one is this idea that there's no pain, no gain, right? That we have to have sore muscles, that we have to like work ourselves to death to actually make any kind of improvements. First of all, you only get sore muscles if you're fit. Generally, you will only get sore muscles if the exercise you're doing is novel, right? So it's like, I work out with a trainer, we do squats, we do whatever, deadlifts and bench press and like all those sort of normal gym kind of stuff. But if we're doing something and it's a new program, I will be sore after the first time we do it because it's something that's new that I haven't done in a while. But we'll do the same workouts for like 3 weeks, and then we'll change workouts. And it's only the very first time I do the new workout that I get sore from it. You can also get delayed onset muscle soreness if you're doing a lot of heavy eccentric, which is where your muscle is lengthening exercise. That is fine because you are building that muscle both stronger and with more length. So you're creating longer muscles. And so that's really good, especially if you have muscle spasticity as an issue. But if you're working out and you're like killing yourself working out, that is going to make you more fatigued, in which case you're not going to be able to do stuff the next day, which is just going to have that cascade of like the bank is in the red, right? Another idea is that you have to do lots and lots and lots of reps. We talk about reps when we talk about neuroplasticity and how we actually change the brain and find workarounds for MS damage and stuff. But it's not really about reps. It's about the repetitions that we do are meaningful to the brain in a way that it pays attention and is capable of noticing a movement as good and marking that as something to repeat in the future. So this is basically the mentality of how we do things at the Neuro Studio, is that we want to do good repetitions. Like if you are going to do something and you can do it really well for 3 repetitions, that is much better than doing it very badly for 10 repetitions or doing it for 10 repetitions where you're not paying any attention at all. There's also this idea about like, it's not a workout if you're not sweating. I don't like sweating, so I actually don't do workouts where I sweat. Pilates workouts are not very sweaty unless you're a person who sweats really easily. So you can still be making really good changes and improving your strength and balance and mobility and everything without breaking a sweat. So that's another idea that I think is out there. If any exercise, any single exercise that you do increases spasticity, increases dizziness, causes more pain, or makes your balance worse, that is not the exercise for you. So when we teach in our workshops, like this is a big thing that I teach in the Pilates for Neuro workshop, we teach that if somebody has an increase in any of these things from in one position, we need to either change the position that person's in, or we need to change the exercise. We are not going to push somebody through having their spasticity increase. If your spasticity is increasing, your body is saying like, it does not feel safe in the movement that you're giving it. And we want people to feel safe in the movements that we're giving them. When people have their muscles start shaking, it's very interesting. There's a DC-based workout where their whole thing is to always take you to the point where your muscles are shaking and you almost can't like hold yourself up anymore. That is something your brain does not like at all. What's happening when you have that muscle shake is your cerebellum, which is the most primitive part of your brain, is searching for stability or for more information about like what is the muscle doing to be able to stabilize you, and it's not able to do that. So you're actually having a tremor that is your brain saying unsafe, unsafe, unsafe. It's like literally if you were on a I just watched The Hunt for Red October again, even though it's really old, but I watched it the other weekend, and they have, where like the submarine's being filled with water and then all the alarms are going off. That shaking, trembling, whatever, when you're working out, is alarms going off that your body does not feel safe. Your brain does not like what it's doing. If you feel like your muscles are like gripping, that's another thing that can be bad, and it sort of causes fatigue. So when we're looking at this shaking, trembling, gripping, like all of those kind of things, the way I like to think about it is like, let's say I have a cell phone and I'm trying to download some document that somebody sent me, but I don't have Wi-Fi, and I only have like one bar. And I'm sitting there like walking through like wherever, trying to find where I have two bars, because it's like the thing I'm trying to download is like taking forever. And like if you look at what happens to the battery on your cell phone, like it just starts to drain super fast when there's not a good signal. So it's basically like what happens with our brain when we're not getting good signals from our environment, from our muscles, from our exercises. Your brain is sitting there like searching to try to find where you're safe, because every single thing that our brain does is to protect the organism. That's its first and foremost duty. And if you are not safe, you're draining that battery super fast. So any exercise we do, we want it to be an exercise where we feel safe. So that is what we want to teach you. So we want to teach you about exercise that's for energy, but is also helps you create ease in movement. We don't want movement to ever feel like it's really hard. And like if you watch people who are really beautiful movers, things don't look hard to them, right? It's like they make things look effortless. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create movement that feels more effortless. So easiest way to test, does your body or your client's body accept this exercise as like safe to be doing, is can they breathe easily when they're doing it, right? So it's like, if I say we're going to stand on one leg and the person is like unable to take a deep inhale and deep exhale, then their body is gripping somewhere, right? Another thing is if you are doing that same exercise, let's say we're standing on one leg and their eyes are like darting all over the place. They're looking, like their brain is looking for extra input to make that exercise doable. So that battery is being drained because the searching for signals. So breathing should be easy. Eyes should not be darting all over the place. If you don't have that, then you want to do a different exercise or change the position. So if your goal in an exercise is to work on push off. So push off is a really important part of walking. So if I'm standing, I have one leg behind me, I bend my knee and lift my heel before I take another step. So we do a lot of push off exercises. So if I have somebody standing and they're like, can't take a deep breath and they're gripping and they feel their glute a lot, and it's like, well, it's not really a glute exercise, it's a calf knee bend exercise. Then what I might do is I might have them lay down on their side and push off the wall from like a sideline position. Or I might have them seated and just work on the lifting the heel from a seated position. So you can do the same exercise, just finding a position where there's ease in that movement. Or you can just say, you know what, this movement is like not working. We're going to do something else. So let's forget about doing this leg exercise right now. Let's do an upper body exercise. You can increase sensory stimulation. So it's like, okay, let's say you are doing the standing exercise and you're really like, feel like you're gripping. It's like, okay, well, what if you put your, let's say you're standing on your right leg. What if you put your left hand just very gently on something nearby? So whether that's like the wall or like a dresser or something like that. Does that extra bit of sensory stimulation that tells you where you are, does that help? What if we took your eyes and looked directly at one point and said, don't think about that standing leg. Try not to move around that point. So if you stare straight ahead, you want the point to be in the right spot. So like if somebody wasn't leaning enough into the one leg for the other leg to come off and for them to be balanced, I could say, okay, we're going to look at this point that's directly in front of us. And we see that they're unbalanced there. So I'm going to say, move your entire body slightly to the side of that point so that they then shift their weight into their hip. And then their hip could turn off that gripping. And then the sensory information that we've given them is something that their brain has determined is meaningful and can help them find ease in that movement. Everyone has different sensory stimulation that their body likes. I actually am not a tactile learner. So some people are tactile learners. That means they really like hands-on assists and things like that. I don't like being touched. So it's better for me to have visual cues. Some people are really good with verbal cues or with like imagery. So it's like, imagine that your leg is a tree trunk, and a tree trunk can't move because it's like so stable. It's not like a little spindly tree. It's like a tree trunk. And so like that tree trunk can't move, but you can move your pelvis or your upper body around the tree trunk. So just whatever that sensory information is that works for somebody. And we go into this in our courses, but I can't go through all of them right now, but there's lots of different ways to give people additional stimulus that can make movement easier. So again, we're just trying to figure out you or the client. You can work out hard and you can do tough things, but only when your body feels stable and is able to be responsive in that stability. And a big part of that is going to be posture, and how our posture and how we sort of set ourselves up affects our reflexes. So if you can have bones stacked, that makes standing and walking easier. So if you imagine that I'm leaning forward, which is a very common thing that people with MS might do, like look down at the floor if you're used to tripping. I actually lean backwards, but that's its whole own weird compensation. It's going to actually be harder to move than if like everything's stacked like the way it should be. Now, ideally, strong hips and core will make movement easier, right? Because like you need strong hips for walking, for balancing, for whatever, but you also need your core to be strong, because that helps like react, like if you kind of fall off balance. That said, just exercising those muscles, so saying like we're just going to do ab work or we're just going to do hip exercises, that's not necessarily going to give you stability. Stability is reflexive, right? So it's like we want those muscles to be so conditioned and your senses to get the best feedback that they can be getting, so that you don't really have to think about like your hip doing the right thing or your core firing in the right way. Like these are not things that you're just like, okay, well, I would be more stable if I contract my glute med and my inner thigh at the same time. It's like, these are not things we can really think about. They have to happen reflexively. So we're looking for like a reflexive stability. And then some things that are just kind of good energy boosters, moving. Like I said, you could be moving on the floor, you could just be standing, you could just not be on the couch. In general, they don't tire you unless there's something that is specifically very tiring for whatever reason. Like if it's like your leg gets super easily tired, then try moving your upper body. If your upper body gets really easily tired, try moving your legs. Being outside, there's actually a lot of research in MS that talks about the benefits of vitamin D, but also the benefits of sunshine and fresh air and all of those things have a lot of research behind them. There's benefits to having your part of you touch dirt, like touch the earth. There's actually like I think it's electromagnetic energy that kind of goes through that there are studies behind that. And then sometimes when you're tired, eating something can be helpful. And then especially a food that I'm going to call aggressive. So an Altoid is a very aggressive food, in my opinion, right? It's like a very kind of hello kind of food. Sour foods work really well. I was talking to somebody who is the parent of a pediatric MS patient. So her son's like 10 and he has MS. And he gets so sleepy, he falls asleep at school all the time. And they have him have sour candy. So he chews on sour candy as a way to help him wake up. And so sort of in review of some of the things we talked about, and then I'll have some time to take questions. The lifestyle choices that we make can impact our fatigue. We can do exercise that's effective without draining the bank. So it's probably going to take some money out of the bank, but we're not going to clear it out of the bank. I work out pretty hard when I work out, but I don't get more tired when I do it. You can exercise and have that be energizing, and moving throughout the day can help you stave off fatigue. So if you want to learn more from us at the Neuro Studio, if you're a practitioner, I have a 16-hour course. It's sort of our signature course. It's been taught to 1,500 people or so worldwide. That's Pilates for neurological conditions. So that's basically foundations of how to work with all the main neurological conditions and then the symptoms that are common with them. Fatigue is one of them, but also balance issues, walking issues, spasticity, rigidity if it's Parkinson's, which is different, weakness, bladder and bowel issues. And you'll learn exercises that work, exercises that don't work, sort of like how to assess different things. So it's like if somebody has a balance problem, where is their balance problem coming from? Is it a neurological balance problem? Is it musculoskeletal? Is it a flexibility issue? Is it like their inner ear? Like, well, we go through all sorts of stuff like that. And really, like, the goal of that course has always been to give people the knowledge that they need to help prevent unnecessary disability, of which about half of the disability that people who have neurological conditions have is preventable. But the system is not really set up that well to prevent it. And then if you're a patient, we have a lot of workouts that go based on the principles of the stuff that I was talking about today. We have like an online workout studio with like hundreds of videos, and it's like $25 a month. And Megan and myself teach on it. And then we also do a Q&A every month that's free to members. So you literally can just ask us any of the questions that you have. I know some people on this particular webinar are people who join us in that. We can find you a teacher who's trained in working in our style. So you can just email us and you can find somebody who will work with you on Zoom. And in a lot of places, we can find somebody who will work with you in person. You can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook, and we post a lot of free information there. And whenever we have these free talks, we post them as well. And then I did a project during COVID. It's called the MS Master Plan. It is basically a video encyclopedia of all things MS. So it's 27 hours long. I never expect anyone to watch all 27 hours, but it's basically anything you could want to know about MS treatments, everything, disability law, all of that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff is in there. So let me come back here. And I saw there was in the chat. So OGG wrote a certain mushroom coffee works well for her and she's sensitive to coffee. I like how coffee tastes. I really like how coffee smells. Like, I think coffee smells so good. My husband has this espresso maker in the basement, which is where my studio is, and it smells like a coffee shop and it's amazing, but it gives me the worst stomach aches. So like for me, it's an absolute, I cannot do coffee. But does anyone have any questions that I can answer for you? I know that was kind of a lot pretty quickly, but hopefully things made sense. And there is going to be a recording that we'll send you so you can watch, pause, whatever. And you can always email us if you have questions. You could say like, you talked about something, I didn't quite catch it. But if there's certain things that you want to ask, we can answer that for you. But that was exactly 1 hour. I'm not usually that much perfect on time, but hopefully we will see you in some other talk or some other place someday soon.
I have a question, Mariska.
Yes. Yes.
So you talked about delayed onset muscle soreness.
Yeah.
Would you include delayed onset muscle soreness, delayed spasticity? Like you do?
Actually, yes. I think that is a thing. Like, I don't think people talk about that, but I think that is a thing. So for me, like, it's more that, so like spasticity is its whole big, huge topic, like that we discuss a lot, because it is of everything in MS, it's actually the thing that causes the most disability, right? And spasticity is a reflex caused by the stretch reflex that's not able to be managed by the brain, right? Because there's damage somewhere along the pathway. And it basically makes your muscles tighten up. And it can be the feeling of like a tight muscle, or it can feel like a crampy muscle. Sometimes when you work a muscle really hard, it ends up getting more stiff, like the following day. And I think that what the cause of it is actually isn't how hard you worked. It's, did you then sit? Did you then, like, was that muscle shortened or not used for like an extended period afterwards? That being said, because I definitely experienced that. When I used to travel all the time and I was teaching weekend workshops, I would tell my trainer on Thursday, because I would be flying out Friday, I would be like, we cannot do quads today, because the next day I would be sitting on an airplane and my quad spasticity would be so bad that it would be actually really hard for me to bend my knee, because you're sitting, right? So when you're sitting, you're not able to like kind of keep moving. So sometimes when you push it too much, I think it does make it worse. It doesn't make it long-term worse, right? It's not like going to make your spasticity worse forever. It's just going to be like in that next moment, but it's especially if you don't, it's almost like you have to repeat the thing, but maybe not as aggressively, but just kind of whatever the movement was, just kind of keep it going so that muscle doesn't shorten. That makes sense, Jane?
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense, because that is worse than the soreness, is the spasticity. Right. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And it's like, the thing that I think is like, so like kind of normal is like, after you work out, you're just like, and now I will sit. Right.
Right. Because you're tired.
So you're like, so now I will sit down, when actually it's like, yes, sit down, but then, do other things. And I do feel like doing some sort of like self massage manual therapy kind of stuff can be really helpful, like foam rolling, or like, using like mine is I'm never far away from like all my little tools and tricks, but like using like something like this. So this is a hyper ice, like whatever, like just doing stuff to try to loosen the muscle up so that it doesn't get a chance to like go like, and then make it hard to move. But yeah, that's that we talk about that a lot in our workshops, because that is the hardest thing to work with. It's like spasticity is the bane of my existence. If I didn't have any spasticity, I would have no issues. I'd have issues. I'd have issues. I'd still have like nerve pain and insomnia, and like I'd have things, but it would be like, but I would be super happy about my physical state if I could get rid of that one symptom.
Okay, what is the AF for?
Oh, as fuck. So tight as fuck, tired as fuck. So
that is what I thought. Tired as fuck.
Tired as fuck. Yes. So fucking tired all the time.
Yeah, okay.
So Dee said she does well in heat and the cold bothers me. Cold bothers me worse than heat bothers me, but it bothers me differently. So what happens in cold is you tense your muscles, right? So everyone tenses their muscles when they're cold. It's shivering, right? And so shivering is a muscle contraction. Well, if you have muscle spasticity, you don't want your muscles to just be like doing that, which is what they're doing when you are cold or shivering. So I have completely different symptom issues based on any temperature extreme. So it's like, if it's cold, my spasticity is worse. If it's hot, my fatigue is worse and my dizziness is worse, because those like kind of kick up other symptoms. I actually, when I was first diagnosed with MS, well, not like first diagnosed, but like maybe like was 5 years into it, I actually used to be really into Bikram yoga, like where it was 100 and whatever degrees and like super humid, because for me, it made my muscles feel so good. Yeah. Right. But it's like, now I would fall over because I would be so dizzy. So the vast majority of people with MS are heat intolerant, but that might not be something that happens initially, and it might not be something that happens ever, but just any kind of temperature extremes are like not good for me. And I'm in perimenopause right now. So I'm having like night sweats and like waking up in the middle of the night where I'm just like, it's so hot. I'm like freezing or I'm just melting. So I feel like my body is creating its own temperature extremes right now, which is super not fun. Dee says she has a heater under her desk. So my feet get so cold. Sometimes I have like a heating pad and I put my feet on the heating pad. Terry wants me to talk about vibration plates. So power plate. So I have a Galileo. They're $9,000. Power plates are like $12,000. You do not need to have a $10,000 like vibration plate. They have, I don't remember the name of the brand, but my father-in-law got one because vibration plates are really good for bone density and just muscle building, especially for older people. So he got one because he was like had a hip replacement or whatever. Anyway, there's two different types of vibrations. So a Galileo is an oscillating plate, which means it vibrates like this. A power plate vibrates like this. I do not like this for a variety of reasons. One, it makes your head feel like it's shaking, which I find to be a very, very unpleasant feeling. On an oscillating plate, you can sort of take that out a little bit. And the way you do that is you put a little bend in your knees. But the beauty of an oscillating plate is that this movement is how your pelvis moves when you walk, right? So it's like sending signals all the way from your legs through your pelvis and like back down again that are basically, let's say it's 26 hertz or whatever. So 26 times a second, it's sending a walking signal through your body, right? The benefit of vibration in neurological conditions is the vibration gets around the stretch reflex, because the stretch reflex doesn't happen as fast as the vibration if you go above 20 hertz. So this is the most important thing when you're looking for a vibration plate. that it goes above 20 hertz if you want to work with spasticity. When you are in the lower ranges, it's still beneficial, but it does not like trick spasticity away. And it does not cure spasticity. It's like, if you're standing on a vibration plate for 3 minutes, you've got roughly 3 to 10 minutes of spasticity really being cut down. But what you can do with that is, it's like, we have cut the spasticity way down. Then we're going to do the exercises that are negatively affected by the spasticity. And then maybe we go back to the vibration plate, because ultimately spasticity is a protective reflex. So we're trying to tell the brain, you don't need to do that. We're safe, we're good. You don't need to do that protective reflex. Now, saying that, I mean, my spasticity is definitely better than it used to be, but I also take medication for it. I think medication for spasticity for most people is really essential. I don't think that we can do enough in the exercise environment. And I think we're hindered by how tight some people's muscles get. But you don't want to like overdo it. Like, you don't want to overly correct spasticity, because then they're so weak, right? Because spasticity is also covering weakness. A vibration plate also is very good for bone density, and people who have neurological weakness tend to have weaker bones in the same place where the muscles are weak. So if I have a DEXA scan of my left leg versus my right leg, it's going to be that my left leg has worse bone density than my right leg does, for several reasons. It's the pull of the muscle, like neurologically, but it's also that my right side is stronger, so I use it more, right? So it's like, even if I think I'm doing a squat evenly, if I'm doing a two-legged anything, my right leg is doing more of the work, right? So then its bone density would be better. They use vibration plates for bone density a lot for people who are paralyzed, because if you're paralyzed, you can't load you're not loading the bones, and loading the bones is the way you build bone density. So you can recreate that with vibration plate. So yes, it was 20 hertz and above. So mine goes to 30 hertz. There's some that go to like 50 hertz. You just need to be in the higher range. So I like 24. For some reason, 24 hertz is my favorite. And then if you're doing exercises, whatever exercise you want to do, standing on a vibration plate, you are having way more muscle activation than you could ever create yourself, right? Because you have this like external force creating like this extra muscle contraction that no one could physically do that. So it's a good way to strengthen weak muscles. I also think it's a great way to add a very interesting to your brain sensory thing, because vibration goes so deep into your body. It's like, if I even take this and put it on a muscle, it's going to reach all the way to the vibration sensors in my skin, which are like literally super deep. They're the deepest sensation. So it's like, we have light touch, firm touch, vibration is underneath that. So we're going like to the level of the bone, which is, I think, pretty cool. But there's like, if you go on Amazon and you look up vibration plate, I want to say there's one that's like $400 or $500, but like look for oscillating and look for going above 20 hertz. That's the two things that you need. And it's not going to be like as smooth as the $9,000 one, but it's like, it's still totally workable. It's like you still can get the benefit from it. You don't have to spend the kind of money I spent. And why did I spend that money? It was because I was going to a PT, neuro PT, and they were very big into vibration. It was one of their big things. We're huge into it. So I just wanted the same brand that they had. And I don't think there was actually, at the time, I don't think there was like cheaper ones. It was before there, like Galileo is the one that they do most of the clinical trials with. So if you go to like Galileo.com, you can see vibration for Ehlers-Danlos, vibration plates for osteoporosis, vibration plates for healing bone fracture. Like literally, like look up a thing and they'll have like some sort of a test or whatever with it. So the use of TENS is really interesting. So TENS can be used for pain, and TENS can also be used for spasticity. So if you are using TENS on a muscle that is has spasticity, you want to, TENS is transdermal electronic neuromuscular stimulation. You can buy a TENS unit at CVS. Like they sell them everywhere now. And basically it's a little box and they'll have like electrodes, and the electrodes will stick to, you put them on a muscle in like 2 places. And then for TENS, you don't want it to contract the muscle. So contracting the muscle is a whole different kind of e-stim, which I really like as well. But TENS is used for pain. And then in terms of using it for spasticity, what you do is you put it on a muscle that's in spasm. And then it sends, it's like a prickle, is like the best way I can describe it. It's just a weird sensation, right? It's just a prickly sensation. And then that prickly sensation travels up the same nerve pathways that pain and the stretch reflex travel up. So there's a limited number of pathways that things can get into your brain. So if it's from your leg, pain signals traveling up from your leg, muscle spasticity is traveling up from your leg. When you have like a TENS on at the same time, I think about it as like you basically are dialing down both of them. So you wouldn't feel TENS as much as if you didn't have anything, but you won't feel the other one as much either. So like, let's say I was walking through the house and I hit my arm on something. The immediate first thing you do is you grab it. And the reason you do that is because you're sending a signal of pressure to compete with the pain signal. And it's instinctual, right? And a TENS unit is just a high-tech way to do something we instinctually do when, like, if your muscle hurts, like I got my shoulder dry needle today and it's really sore. So what do you do when it's really sore? You rub it, you squeeze it, whatever. Like what you're doing is you're trying to send a different signal. It's not like you're rubbing or squeezing or whatever your muscle in any way is going to fix what's wrong with it, right? It's like, that doesn't fix it. It's like, it just sends a competing signal. And then you have 2 competing signals makes the other one like turn down. But for TENS, like in terms of the studies and how they use it for spasticity, you need to have it on for like 20 minutes. So it's actually kind of a long time to have it on for it to like turn spasticity down. But I've had where my leg hurt so much while I was sleeping from muscle spasticity, I actually just slept with the TENS unit on it. And you literally can fall asleep with like just that prickle because it was like enough to distract from it. So that we talk about that in the Pilates for Neuro course as well. So I'm more high tech than Megan is. So Megan is very low tech. I am very high tech. I like all the cool toys and whatever. And I think it's probably because, I actually have it. And so a lot of this stuff, it's just easier if you have technology helping you out. If you don't have like a teacher there working with you, it's just like, oh, I could add a little bit of an extra sensory thing for myself, but you don't need to have all these things. It's just kind of fun to play around with them. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to say goodbye.
Sorry.
Oh, Jenny, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yes.
Anything to put money in the bank, whether it's directly on that day or rather to make some sort of investment that pays off in a month or 2, maybe, like 2 different questions, but yes.
Okay, so long-term, putting money in the bank is doing things like smart exercise and whatever, because the stronger you get, the less energy it's going to take to do something, right? So that's how you can put money in the bank. If I know I'm going to be doing something like tomorrow night, we're going to like this fancy dinner. It's like one of the like chef's table, whatever thing. And it's like at 5:00. So I am not going to do anything really tomorrow. I'm going to teach like one private client. I have a phone call with a friend, and then I'm really not going to do anything else because I'm like, this is going to be a long social gathering. I find that outside time can really put money in the bank, right? Just, they say like, even if you, like first thing when you wake up in the morning, like getting outside and like having the sun and the fresh air and whatever, like is extremely energizing. In terms of like literally your cortisol levels and things like that are affected by sunshine, right? And it's like, even when there's not sunshine, there's sunshine, you know what I mean? It's like how you can get sunburned on a cloudy day. It's like, it's a little bit different when it's really sunny, but like just getting outside, I think like banks it. But getting a little bit of movement kind of throughout the day is going to put money in, but it has to be that that movement that's easy, right? Like we don't want to do anything that feels like it's, you know, energy sucking. But really over time, the more you have smart movement, the less difficult all movement is going to be, right? So, and I think that's even true of non-neuro people. Like when you go on vacation and you literally don't work out at all, and then you come back and you're like having to get back in the habit of working out, it's like it feels effortful, when previously it was just like, oh yeah, it's just like 6 o'clock, and it's what I do at 6 o'clock. It just becomes something like once you get out of a habit. And so on that note, habits, I think, are also like a thing. Like if it's just like, this is what I do at this time, it just doing those routines makes things like a lot easier.
Okay. Yeah, I work with a lot of long COVID patients in the clinic and also other neurological cases. But yeah, basically, I do try to get them into some sort of endurance work, but it's difficult, especially some respond to it and some can work with it, and others, they're doing simple machine help cyclical movements on like sitting bikes, and
But if they're
get into
not,
this.
yeah, but if they're not stable in that movement in some place, it's not easy, right? So it's not easy for them. So it's like if they feel like if you see somebody like on like an exercise bike and they're sort of leaning to one side and like pushing and one leg more, that's like running that battery out, right? So it's like what we would look at is like, how can we make that like an easier movement? I feel like endurance sort of happens when your body just keeps giving you more length of a rope, right? It's just like, I'm going to give you a little bit more. I'm going to give you a little bit more. And so I think sometimes people think about exercise as like, we're going to do a bike or a hand bike or something like that. And it's like, well, that might not be the thing that's energizing to that person.
Yeah.
Right. It might not be the thing that makes them have the ability to have more endurance. Right. So it's like, so I have an exercise bike. The exercise bike is actually not easy for me to do because my left leg wants to lock straight and I can't get it to not want to do that. Right. I mean, I could have like, I could be sitting and just not have my knee be able to extend that much. But I feel like I definitely feel like my right leg is doing all the work and I can't even it out. Right. So for me, that's not like a great exercise. Like for me, it's like better to go for a walk because I don't have that same response in my body to what that exercise is. Right. So it's like, if the bike is something that needs to happen because it's like at the clinic that you're using, it's like one thing we do sometimes is we'll do like a TheraBand behind the knee and create some sort of pull assistance so that their leg is moving like a little bit more smoothly, or like working on how do we create more stability or more sensation for that person.
I also work a lot with yoga flows, and there I can focus very easily on easy breathing and as you were saying, good support in the postures. But I'm unsure about whether that's sufficient to help them with these cases of fatigue where they're like, I cannot do my everyday life. I'm unable to
Okay,
do my
so
house chores and stuff.
okay, on the yoga thing, this I think I'll make this my next, like after Parkinson's month, I'll make this my next little workshop. So dynamic range of motion exercise, where we're taking a joint through its full range of motion, is something that should not weaken somebody. When you are doing something like yoga, where you have any kind of long held stretch, you are temporarily weakening that muscle because you're pulling apart. In the sarcomeres, you have actin and myosin, or like these two components of it. And you have pulled them apart to the degree that they cannot contract a muscle immediately afterwards, and for like half an hour plus after something has been stretched. So if you have somebody and they're doing like a yoga thing, and I love yoga, I mean, I used to do it all the time, you might be actually making them weaker muscularly for a temporary period of time, because we're very rarely stretching the only things that should be stretched, which are muscle and fascia, and nerves can stretch, but you can't, like, once you are going kind of past where the muscle can rejoin and start contracting again, and you're getting into stretching ligaments, tendons, whatever, it's actually harder for the muscles to do their work, which can make people feel weaker. So I'm not opposed to yoga. I'm opposed to yoga as it's taught, if it's not like end of day and person doesn't need to do anything for the rest of the day, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
to me it's more like a dynamic thing, and less like you go into a pose and then you stay there and then you just rest in the pose. It's more,
yeah,
it's similar to what I see, for example, on your Instagram channel with your Pilates.
Yeah. So Pilates is like, that's where I would say Pilates is different than the way yoga is mostly taught, because Pilates, you don't stay in there are a couple of exercises, but in general, you don't hang in a stretch. Whereas like, I feel like in yoga, it's like you might have like a sun salutation-y type thing, and where you are moving and it's dynamic, and then you stay in a forward fold for like a period of time. So it's like, it's those moments where you're staying in the stretch that can weaken someone temporarily, right? So it's not a permanent thing. It's like a lot of the things that in the neuro world, it's like, it's very hard to like permanently make somebody worse. That's why it's so much more fun to work with in ortho, because in ortho, it's like, if somebody has like a disc issue, it's so easy to just screw them up and like make them worse if you do like the wrong type of movement. But in neuro, it's like temporarily worse. So I always ask people, I'm like, well, tell me how you feel the next day and then the day after. So like when Jane talks about her spasticity is worse, so delayed onset spasticity, I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely a thing that we see. So it's like, if I was working with her and we were doing exercise and she said, well, my spasticity was way worse after we did that, I'd be like, okay, do we knock that out? Do we not do that? Or do we change what we're doing afterwards to make it so hopefully that doesn't happen?
Yeah, no, of course. So in general, to increase all over endurance or to lessen the fatigue, you would say do exercises that are beneficial and that feel safe for the body that doesn't.
Right. So, and in terms of what feels safe is like the person doesn't look like they're looking all over the place and breathing is easy. So if somebody looks like they're gripping, struggling, whatever, then it's not an exercise that's not going to increase fatigue. Right. So it's like, I do stuff that I know I grip when I'm doing it. And it's like, I realize that I'm doing that and I'm okay with it because I know I know how my body's going to respond to it. I'll be like, that's not like so much that it's going to like really like wear me out. But if it was something that was like really wearing me out, then I'd be like, okay, I need to change that. So like I know that the bike does not agree with me. So therefore I'm just like, the bike doesn't agree with me, not doing the bike.
Yes, perfect. And to, yeah, no, you answered that. To gain money for the bank, like in the day, do something like go out, have some sun,
have some
fresh
sun.
air.
I have a
Yes.
swing in my front yard,
Yes.
because we have the best tree in the neighborhood. So we put a swing in for the kids, not our kids. We have no kids, but the neighborhood kids have a swing in our yard because we have the great tree. But like swinging on the swing or just sitting outside and like doing something like reading a book or listening to Demon Copperhead on audio or whatever it is that is something that is like restful without being like lazy restful. Like active resting. Is active resting a word? I'm going to make it a word. I'm going to say like
a
we want
serotonin boost.
Yes, it's like we want to
Kind of.
like exactly. It's like you want to do something that is not static, but that is restful. I'm gonna change my Facebook up status and be like, I'm actively resting right now.
Beautiful.
Resting actively.
You were talking about the heat thing and the cold thing, and I was wondering if you ever tried to desensitize to it. You personally.
So it actually that doesn't really work for
okay.
You can desensitize to like if you have nerve pain, you can desensitize by exposing whatever. But in terms of MS, it's like you can't make your body not rise in temperature if you're overheated, in which case you have more inflammation. That's just science. Like you can't, like you could probably get used to being hotter, but it really, like in terms of how you can affect the body, I don't really think that probably would work.
I mean, like desensitized to the reaction you have to it. I mean, Wim Hof for sure is.
I don't know that you could though, because it's like, I mean, this is how they used to diagnose MS. They would put you in a hot bath, and if you got worse, they were like, "Oh, it's MS," because it's so classic for most people.
That's
that
mean.
heat.
Yes.
Yeah, that it's like, oh, you can't move because we dipped you in hot water. It's like, okay, you have MS, because it is the MS thing.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now for real, I'm saying goodbye, and hopefully I will see you all on the flip side somewhere on social media or something. So thank you all for your attention. And like I said, you'll be getting the recording. I'll probably send it out tomorrow.